Hi, a film I watched last night was A Study in Terror, a 1965 Sherlock Holmes story in which he takes on the case of Jack the Ripper. It stars John Neville as Holmes himself, Donald Houston as Dr. Watson, and there's an all-star cast: Frank Finlay, Anthony Quayle, Judi Dench in an early film role, Barbara Windsor, and many others. Um, the case itself is deliberately quite ahistorical. Although the victims are the actual victims who were killed, the rationale behind it is totally different, and it turns out to be a case involving um, disgraced gentry and um, blackmail and various other intrigues. My problems with the film are multifold. Firstly, I think that John Neville is a perfect choice to play Sherlock Holmes. He looks like Holmes. He has that hawkish, haughty demeanour that works extremely well. Houston as Watson is a bit colourless. I mean, the idea with Watson, as written by Conan Doyle, is that he is the smartest person in any room if Holmes isn't there. And we don't get that sense here. I think there's too much of an overhang from the old Basil Rathbone movies where Watson was deliberately written as an idiot. Um, but the big problem with the film, I think, is that it's taking a historical tragedy is not quite the correct word, but certainly a series of brutal attacks on women and turning it into sleazy fodder. It's not really doing or saying anything terribly interesting to justify morally co-opting the Jack the Ripper murders for a an exploitation picture. Um, I haven't seen the other Sherlock Holmes meets Jack the Ripper film Murder by Decree, but my understanding is that it's a bit more in line with Alan Moore's From Hell, that it's actually using this to tell a larger story about the influence of um, the aristocracy and more social and political themes of the time. This is just cheap sleaze. Um, and as a result, it's pretty distasteful. Technically, it's very competent. I would say that if they had just changed the names and it had been fictitious and it had been a fictitious serial killer with fictitious victims, it would have been still not great, but I wouldn't have any problems with it. Um, but as it is, because it skirts that fine line of quite poor taste, um, even with the likes of, as I say, Judi Dench and Anthony Quayle, big names. If not then certainly now. It just feels a bit queasy and uneasy, and I wouldn't recommend it, as I say, even if it was wholly fictitious. And I really wouldn't recommend it when it's trying to be skirting the edges of acceptability.